Salam and peace. You're watching Muslim Network TV on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, Roku, and a whole lot of social media, and always on our website, muslimnetwork.tv. We are 24/7 based in Chicago, but from all around the world. First memory I have of my father is seeing him behind bars. I have never forgotten that as a child. My father was never convicted or even tried for any crime whatsoever, but it became a routine. However, he will be arrested anytime he took a stand for justice, for democracy, for Islam. For him, all these three things were one and the same. He would be arrested anytime he does that, and he was a sort of a victim of a leftover British colonial laws in India during their occupation, that which allowed a person to be quote unquote preventively or preventatively, or whatever you want to call it, detain people without any evidence or without committing any crime. So I promised myself I'll never be behind bars. So far, so good. I don't know in the future of America what's there for me. I contribute monthly now to get people released from bail. I have hired lawyers. Actually, once I gave my own house on bail to get some innocent person released, and he won the lawsuit, and hopefully he got some money against all of that torture. But what about animals who are often locked up for our pleasure, quote unquote? God Almighty has told us in the Quran that all animals have their communities. Is it okay to take them away from their families and their communities? There are more than 200 verses in the Quran dealing with animals, and 6 chapters are actually named after animals. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has said that a good deed done to an animal is like a good deed done to a human being, while an act of cruelty to an animal is as bad as cruelty to a human being. Someone around the Prophet, peace be upon him, asked him a question, O Messenger of God, is there a reward for us for serving animals? Prophet replied, there is a reward for serving any living being. I hope that includes trees as well. Today we'll be talking with a couple of people who are passionate about animals. They feel for them. Probably they talk to them as well. I do. I talk to animals. I hope they listen to me. Sometimes I feel they're listening to me. How do animals feel when they are behind bars, when they are locked up, when their freedom is taken away from them? As human beings are detained nowadays due to pandemic, I'm noticing there are more birds and animals around my house. What is happening around you? Are you noticing any change? We'll be talking today with a person who helped free an elephant in Pakistan, and he has dedicated good part of himself to free animals, Mark Cowne, as well as Dr. Anis Rehman. Welcome to Muslim Network TV, Mark Cowne.
Thank you very much for having me, Imam. It's lovely to be on your show.
Thank you. Mark Cowne is co-founder of Free the Wild. His mission and the mission of Free the Wild is to stop suffering of wild animals in captivity and ultimately finding a way to release them into sanctuary or better equipped zoos. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on. I found what you said about comparing us behind bars to animals behind bars.
Why not?
It is so true. What right do we have to make them captured by us? They have done nothing wrong. And to make them exploit them for our own personal entertainment. What you said from the Quran is really inspiring. And it was one of the things which was quoted by the High Court in Islamabad when they took the decision that those animals in that zoo needed to be freed. And I think that's a very compassionate statement.
Oh, I'm glad that the courts are reading Quran. That's very good. So I would like to know more about that. But two things happen. I mean, early in August, there is a news came out. I think it was New York Times and many places, and I followed that deeply. That an Indian elephant named Mara was taken from Argentina Zoo during the pandemic, 1,500 miles to Brazilian sanctuary.
Yes.
And now we're hearing about this Kaavan, which is a Sri Lankan elephant, which was gifted to Pakistan. And now it will be moved from there to Cambodia.
Yeah.
And are zoos going down in quality, or animal rights movement is becoming stronger? What is the fact here?
I think there's a lot of changes happening with zoos around the world. In Western countries, zoos are becoming less popular. We're finding that young people are unfortunately far less interested in the real world and absorb themselves completely in their video games and things. And if they don't see it on their iPhone screen, they're not particularly interested. So actual numbers of people going to zoos are decreasing. The purpose of zoos has also changed a lot. The first zoo in the world was Regent's Park Zoo in London. And at that stage, it was a research facility for doctors to understand all the different animals from around the world. And they decided that by commercializing it and allowing people to come and see the animals, helped pay for the research that was being done. In reality now, the research is pretty much done. There are very few animals that have not been completely researched in one way or another. And now, of course, with electronic technology and the internet, it is so easy to share information. So it's not necessary for every city in every country in every part of the world to be undertaking similar work. It can be shared more easily. The other thing which is happening is that zoos primarily were in the center of big cities, and of course are sitting on very, very expensive real estate. So there's an opportunity, of course, for them to downscale and make significant money by changing what they're doing. But the thing is that there's also a purpose for zoos, and particularly like the one in Islamabad. We are seriously conscious of the role that zoo plays with some very impoverished people from local neighborhoods who live in very, very bad conditions, in awful sort of levels of accommodation, bad sanitation. They work really hard, really long hours, and the only escape they've got is for themselves to go to somewhere like the zoo for the weekend to have a picnic or something. So we're not against zoos. We're just against the idea of animals being really mistreated in zoos, be that deliberately or through lack of education of the people who look after them. And unfortunately, in the incidents of the elephant Kaavan in Pakistan, he has had a pretty bad life for the last 27 years. And it's caused him rather a lot of mental distress. Not physical, he's in quite good physical shape, but it has been a severe episode for him from a mental point of view. And I'm sorry I'm talking quite a lot, but yeah, we've been working on this for 5 years, so there's rather a lot to get into a fairly short spot. The thing that is strange about zoos in Asia is because the Asian people are very used to Asian elephants working for them, being working animals. They feel a need to actually have these elephants in zoos under the charge of a mahout. Anywhere else in the world, it doesn't happen. Elephants in zoos in the rest of the world are exactly the same exhibit as any other animal. They are not put in crushes, their spirits are not broken, they are not brutalized or made to perform tricks. Whereas for some reason in Asia that does happen. And it's terrible because it does create massive mental issues. If you look at the intelligence rating of animals in the world, elephants are number 3 on the list of intelligent animals. They care, they cry, they have massive emotions. Kaavan cries. It's a very sad situation, and we feel that in his instance, he's suffered long enough. And it's time now that he is retired. And when the zoo comes back together again, as I'm sure it will one day, that it be full of really highly trained people to look after the animals properly
Hmm.
and not to
But
suffer.
a while ago, thinking of intelligence, being alone first. Partner died a while ago. I think, I read somewhere, I think, I don't remember, a few months ago, that a herd of animals showed up when a person who was taking care of them in a good manner in some sanctuary in Africa, when he passed away, they showed up to offer condolences. Actually, that's how people felt they came.
Yeah, elephants do that. Elephants are a really interesting animal. We see them living in herds in Africa, but we don't. Only recently we've realised that the herds we see are part of an even bigger herd, which come together sort of annually, and thousands of them come together. Herds of 100, herds of 50, they all come together, and they come to places where their ancestors have died. And they actually almost pay respect. They look for the bones. They sort of, they congregate. It's weird. They sort of almost know who's missing. That like, oh, Malik's not here this year. I wonder what happened to him. Oh, have you heard about him? They genuinely communicate. They are incredibly intelligent animals. They are third on the list. They're only beaten by chimpanzees and I think orangutans. I could be wrong about the second one, but it's incredibly intelligent animals. The thing is also, Kaavan, we've had many discussions about this. It was very sad that his partner died, and regrettably that was as a result of not understanding the veterinary problems with elephants. But bull elephants do lead quite solitary lives. They leave a group of elephants and they'll wander alone around for many years until either they find a herd to mate with, or they might get chased away by another bull and still be on their own. It's not essential for them to have a mate. What is essential is that they're not beaten, treated badly, brutalized. That's essential. So by giving Kaavan, we did think about the options of giving Kaavan a mate, but that's not going to cure the mental issues that he has. That's a completely different ballgame.
How did you come to know about what is happening to Kaavan in Pakistan?
I took a phone call that I probably should never have taken. My wife Gina and I worked with wildlife for many, many years. We were from South Africa, and we were involved in the creation of the Madikwe Game Reserve in northwestern South Africa, 85,000 hectares. And we were involved in the translocation of over 10,000 mammals into that area, including 350 elephants. It was the biggest translocation of animals in the history of the world. It was called Operation Phoenix. Incredibly successful. Anyway, that was many years ago, a different lifetime. And then I came and lived in England and started a completely different business representing celebrity talent. And one of my friends, one of my clients is Cher, who I'm sure you know quite well in America. And Cher was with me one night in Qatar, of all places, and we were talking about Billy the elephant in the Los Angeles Zoo and how Billy suffers in that zoo. And I told Cher about me and Gina translocating the animals in South Africa. And I didn't think she'd really obviously paid that much attention to what I was saying. Anyway, one day, completely out of the blue, I get this phone call from her saying, won't you please help me with an elephant in Islamabad? I thought, oh, okay. You sort of think that at that time, you don't quite realize the full implications. When we moved 350 elephants from Gonorrhea in Zimbabwe, it was with the Zimbabwean government's support because they were starving and being poached, and we needed to move them to South Africa, put them in the reserve there. I didn't quite realize what the problems we were going to face with Kaavan was. I didn't know he was a gift from Sri Lanka. I didn't know what was happening at the zoo. I didn't understand the changes of management going on. So it became a much, much bigger project than that which we ever set out to undertake, and much more complicated, much more difficult. We've had changes of government, changes of management of the zoo, changes of control. It's like every time we get somewhere, it's like 3 steps back again. But we decided to do this. And so we got really committed to this. But then we realized that Kaavan is just one of the problems. There are a lot of other issues at the same zoo with the bears, the wolves, a crocodile, lots of animals in serious distress. And then we started posting stuff on the web, whatever, and suddenly we're getting stuff from all over the world about an animal here, an animal there. And we realized how big the problem actually is. It's not just one place that we've got a problem, it's everywhere. So we started Free the Wild, a charity with the mission of trying to aid and support those animals who are suffering in captivity. And we realized that it's a great goal to say we'd like to free them all, but that's an impossibility. To free some is fantastic. To free others is not possible. But to train the staff to look after them properly and to improve their conditions in their incarceration is a much better option than letting them suffer. So,
tell me that when, idea of taking an Indian elephant from Brazil, is from Argentina to Brazil, or taking a Sri Lankan elephant from Pakistan to Cambodia. Do you think that isn't this better to return them to their original environment? The question I have in mind, as human beings in different parts of the world will have to learn the language and culture of others, do elephants in Africa and Asia speak the same way and can talk to each other or feel at home?
I think they all respond to acts of kindness, acts of brutality, acts of fear, the same as everything does. I don't think it's a question of language. I think it's a question of how you behave with them. One of our colleagues is currently in Islamabad with Kaavan, Dr. Amir from Four Paws, and he's singing Frank Sinatra songs to Kaavan, which, as I'm sure Kaavan probably speaks Urdu, may not be resonating the same as it would if it was in Las Vegas, but it's definitely having a very passive effect on Kaavan. So I think it really comes down to how you treat animals. And I think that they are pretty multicultural. I'm not sure if they all speak elephant or they speak local languages, but they're pretty multicultural in emotion.
You're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and I'm speaking with Mark Cowne. And we'll take this short break before we continue our conversation.
My wife, she's a professor at the University of Cincinnati, who's Catholic, and by her watching and listening to our 3-year-old son watch Adam's World, she ended up taking Kalima Shahada. She embraced Islam because she learned so much about Islam and the other prophets. It really affected our life in a great way, and because of Sound Vision and Adam's World, we're Muslims.
I took my Shahada 15 years ago, and I actually am from a rural part of Ohio. And so I found the catalog for Sound Vision, and I ordered the tapes and the CDs and the books, and I used those, and especially for my little daughter, that's how we basically learned our Islam, and Islam entered our hearts through the wonderful works of Sound Vision.
Okay, assalamu alaikum, brother. I just want you to know that I love the Sound Vision website, that a lot of times when I'm looking for information, especially as it relates to homelessness, domestic violence, and women issues, I go to that website, and then I see what you've written, and then I copy and paste it, and spread the word, because the wisdom is there, so I can't do any better than what Sound Vision has already done.
Sound Vision is our survival guide. It is the organization that provides skills for Muslims how to survive and thrive in this community here in the U.S.
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Anam, I'm in 11th grade, and I grew up with Adam's World, and what it taught me was unity, respect, and love for the Muslim Ummah.
Adam's World is the greatest show ever made. Take me to the Kaaba, man. I love that puppet.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah. Let's explore.
I've just received a message from my head of accounting, whose name is Afsar Hussain. And Afsar is a very good Muslim, and he's watching your Muslim channel now. Very surprised to be seeing me on it.
All right. Well, so there are some people who are watching.
Well, we know we've got one. Yeah, so that's good. And he's Muslim. So that's 100%.
All right. So, Mark, one of the thing I was just amazed about was his successful slogan on this campaign, the world's loneliest elephant. It may or may not be, but who coined that?
I think it's become generic for him. You know, he is the best known elephant in the world. If you search Kaavan on Google, you'll get easily 5 million responses, because since we've been doing this, the publicity around it has been immense. And it's picked up really, really big followings from sensible organizations like Four Paws and the World Wildlife Fund, to complete and utter nutcases on social media, but all who are very supportive. But I believe he is incredibly lonely, and he's in a very dire straits situation with his mental health. It's so sad that people go to that zoo and they see him swinging his head backwards and forwards from side to side, and they say, "Oh, look at the elephant dancing." And the reality is that is the most obvious sign of an elephant in absolute mental anxiety. So it's like us going to, in the old days, in the Victorian times, like a lunatic asylum, and watching the lunatics in the asylum behaving insanely, as people used to do for entertainment. It is actually of a similar thing to go and watch that elephant going through that intense mental suffering in the zoo.
Any idea how many animals are kept in captivity around the world?
I'm afraid it's hundreds of thousands. And it goes from everything from big animals like orcas at SeaWorld down to even small lizards and small monkeys in people's private collections. Some are incredibly well looked after, some are not. Many are born in captivity, so actually don't have the knowledge of the wide open spaces of their ancestors. So in a way, possibly, they're in a better position than those who've been captured and are now held in captivity. The situation is sad, though, and I really do agree with what you said earlier, that we have a responsibility for the welfare of these animals. We're not, we can't just treat this planet like everything belongs to us and we can ignore everybody else and everything else in this world. We can't do that. We share this space. It's not right for us to inflict pain and suffering on each other or on animals.
You know, why zoos somehow are considered better than other form of captivity? I mean, it is, if human beings who are imprisoned for their crime, they are not set behind bars for people to march in and watch them. So why zoos are still considered an ethical thing to do?
Well, I don't think they are being any longer considered quite so ethical. The first thing we saw was circuses closing down and circuses having to get rid of their animals. Most of the circuses now in the Western world have maybe trapeze artists and jugglers and clowns, but no longer do they have the lion tamers and elephant people and all the rest of it. That's stopped. And zoos will end up going the same way. It will be. It's like I said earlier about the sort of lunatic asylum Victorians. Also, it was really popular in those days to have freak shows, two-headed babies, bearded women, to go and see these. But obviously, over the period of time, that has also become absolutely, completely unacceptable. And the same is happening with zoos. There's many, many young people who absolutely cannot stand the idea of going and looking at an animal in captivity. They'd much rather go and see it in the wild. They'd rather go to Africa, to a game lodge, and see these animals in their natural location, which is so easy now. Back in the Victorian times, travel was impossible. Well, actually, with COVID now, travel is also impossible anyway. But the world suddenly shrank. If you want to go and see bears in Alaska, go and see them. You want to go and see elephants in Asia or in Africa, you can go and see them. Most people can afford to go and see these creatures in the wild. It's not so necessary any longer to keep these animals captive in cities, especially to the degree we have. In England, there are many zoos. Many of the big cities have a zoo. It's like, it's not necessary any longer.
What are animal sanctuaries? I mean, I know that, there are for dogs and cats, stray dogs, stray cats, there are a whole lot. But for wild animals, there are sanctuaries popping up. What is that particular phenomena? And are those sanctuaries, in what sense they are better than zoos?
Sanctuaries, regrettably, once you interfere with nature, it's really hard not to continue to interfere with nature. Even if you look at something the size of the Kruger National Park in South Africa, which is 2 million hectares, it's still interfering with nature. It still is fenced. And although the animals are free roaming within it, there are boundaries within it. And the migration routes are not those that used to be there. So that also is interfering. The difference, though, between a zoo and a sanctuary is zoos keep a mixture of animals within small confined enclosures, whereas a sanctuary tries to provide them with as much of a natural habitat as they could possibly have and give them the freedom to move around and compassion and caring. They are no longer brutalized, they are given carers rather than keepers. There's lion sanctuaries, there's tiger sanctuaries, there's elephant sanctuaries, there's orca sanctuaries, there are many, many sanctuaries, and they are doing enormously good work trying to rehabilitate animals that have really suffered at the hands of people in circuses, private collections, zoos, and absolutely amazingly to me, at the hands of many people in religious things like Buddhists in Sri Lanka, who absolutely, completely abuse the elephants there. Now, that to me is shocking that a group of religious people such as them should actually really be so responsible for such damage to animals. So some of those are also getting put into sanctuaries. So they come from all walks of life. But the sanctuary we're working with in Cambodia, they have a sanctuary in Thailand. That's where they started. They immediately filled that with, I think, 80 elephants. And now they've got the sanctuary in Cambodia, where they've already up to about, I think, 15 elephants and quite a lot more coming. People are very conscious of elephants. They're big. But the problem is it's not just elephants. It goes from them right down to really small creatures too. And there's no reason why we should feel any better about a mouse being badly treated as we should an elephant being badly treated. They're still living animals.
Well, there is someone who has posed a question, and that question is something which pops up again and again, and that argument that we do not have enough time and funds to take care of human being, and why you're concerned about animals so much. I mean, I'm a human rights activist. I spend good amount of time doing that. But what do you think about how to handle that concern?
I think everything has its place, and I think there are plenty of organizations around that are very concerned for the rights of human beings and looking after them. The world is very much a welfare-based place for humans. Look what's happened with COVID. Many countries have come together and have been incredibly supportive of this dreadful pandemic that we're going through at the moment. But what has really seriously impressed me is on the 21st of May, which actually was my birthday, really oddly, on the 21st of May in Islamabad, in the middle of the pandemic of COVID, in the middle of immense human suffering, in the middle of many people of Pakistan actually really being in desperately bad situation themselves, they took the decision to actually focus on the welfare of animals. I cannot believe that those people, at that dreadful moment in mankind's history, still were compassionate towards animals. And I think that shows a great deal about those people, an awful lot more about how incredibly misunderstood those people are by the rest of the world. That was one of the most incredible acts of human kindness I've ever witnessed.
Thank you for noting that. I believe that a human being can become a better human being when it cares for other beings. And there is no question about that. Children grow up. I mean, it is some way the cruelty towards animal translates into a cruel human being.
I think a lot is to do with our upbringing. I'm sure that many of the ways that we turn out later in life are connected to the way that we were brought up. Our influences around us, our peers, our parents, our religions, all of those things have impact on us. Definitely there are some people of the world who are much less compassionate about animals. I would obviously note the Chinese being a fairly significant bunch of people who show very little compassion for animals and do the most dreadful things to dogs, snakes, and all sorts of other creatures. And that is in their culture. You know, if I tell them that they're acting in an inhuman way, they'll not understand me because that's how their culture has been for the last 100,000 years. Equally, they don't understand human rights particularly well either, but they do in their own terms. They're just different from mine. But it's, I think a lot of it is to do with education and the way things are people are brought up. I was thinking about it the other day that as a child, my vision of America was very much around the sort of cowboys and Indians films that were on TV in those days with John Wayne and everything. Yet really my first experience of America was going to New York, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, which has got nothing to do with that whatsoever. Yet the other day I found myself in Monument Valley on the sort of high plains there, which was to me an incredibly spiritual place and home of the Navajo, I think. And that brought me back to my original thoughts of America. And it made me realize how things have changed so incredibly much that the programming as children has changed a lot. We don't show those sort of things anymore because now they're politically incorrect. Equally, we don't show things which exploit animals anymore because they're politically incorrect. So in a way, the whole way the world is moving is to a better status, I think, in terms of how young people perceive things.
Let's talk about young people when we take a short break. This is Imam Malik Mujahid. You're watching Muslim Network TV. on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, Roku, and a whole lot of social media. We're always there on muslimnetwork.tv, our own website. I'm talking with Mark Cowne about animal rights and freeing animals to their original habitat as much as possible. We'll be right back after these messages.
What was it like when you started this network out, when you started Sound Vision those many years ago?
You know, after 9/11, one lady called me and she says, what is your channel which I can watch? And I say, I'm sorry, we don't have a channel. And you know what she said? She said, then how America will know about you?
SubhanAllah. Anything you want to say to the people who are watching? We had one sister who messaged that she grew up on Sound Vision. What do you say to the people who have been long supporters?
Thank you. Thank you. It is because of you we are able to do all of that. So the generation of Adam's World, you need to take it over for the next generation. And that's my invitation to you. So keep telling everybody where to watch. They can watch it on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, or easy thing, muslimnetwork.tv, or our YouTube channel, or our Facebook channel. And with your help, inshallah, ladies, the one who called me, what channel should I watch Muslims on? Answer is here and now.
Open up your eyes.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe, and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
It's Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah. Let's explore.
Welcome back. This is Malik Mujahid, and I'm talking with Mark Cowne. Mark, we were talking about children and how they're raised. Children, most of the children love animals. When they play with them, and a good part of toys are around animals. What happens when they become adults? Adults normally are too busy with themselves. And other beings somehow fade away from their eyes. Is it something to do with our education? Because you were talking about children and education. Do we have good enough understanding and a clear relationship, and then a behavior as well as laws which are tailored on that education, so human beings don't become cruel towards other beings?
it is interesting what you say about laws pillared on that there are very few international laws that relate to the welfare of animals. And that's quite interesting because we've got plenty that relate to human rights, but very few that relate to animal rights. I think children grow up to be influenced from the influences of their childhood. And I'm sure there are plenty of little kids who do dreadful things, but I don't know if they necessarily grow up to be dreadful adults. And equally, I'm sure there's also a lot of sweet children who grow up to be awful adults. So it's quite hard to really sort of do that. I think we most of our lives are spent around the education of people about people, and be that just socially or be that in a religious way. It's those are our teachings, and whatever it is you follow, most of those teachings are very similar, despite us all arguing that they're so different. I don't think they are actually that different, really. But we don't take the same trouble with animals. But we do tend to think that the animals were put there for us. We use them for labor. We use cows to plow with, horses to plow with. We train dogs to do acts for us. We tend to think that they are there for our amusement and our support, and that's not really necessarily true. I think, though, that obviously it's virtually impossible to completely change that. And many animals have become, over the millions of years, quite domesticated animals, which would fail dreadfully were we to release them back into the wild situation. The thing is, it's not about captivity or freedom, it's about treatment. I understand that people do need sometimes to be imprisoned, but you have to still treat them. You cannot abuse the people who you are responsible for. And it's the same, please don't abuse the animals. If I let you look after my dog, please don't beat it the moment I turn my back. It's my dog. It has feelings too.
You mentioned Pakistani court decisions. I have not read the decision, but I know that it's a fairly long, 67-page long verdict, which lays bare the conflicting relations that human beings have with animals, particularly for most of the 20th century. Have you read that particular decision, and how is it unique as compared to other places?
I haven't read so I can't really comment.
So are there other courts in which cases about animals gets in for their opportunity to discuss?
Sorry, I didn't hear that very well.
Okay. So laws are limited and the court cases are limited also, in your view?
Oh, right. Yes. I'm not aware of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So in that way, it is very unique. And if it is referring to the religious and the cultural aspect of the society, and asking for taking care of it and declaring that animals be treated in a better manner. Once that campaign about elephant in Pakistan, Kaavan, once it will be transported to Cambodia in a sanctuary, so you feel that he will be taken care of there? Will he remain in the news, or he will be forgotten about it? Because a story about one particular animal, when it gathers influence and people start talking about it, they have capacity to build on it.
The thing is that Kaavan has actually become almost the international symbol of animals in distress, in captivity. There's hardly anybody in the world who hasn't actually come across Kaavan's story. Once he is in Cambodia, he is going to be in an exceptionally tranquil environment with other Asian elephants, where they are all looked after by carers, mainly women. Everybody's discovered that women have a better way of actually treating them with compassion, caring, and restoring their emotional stability. It's very hard to say that Kaavan has the ability to fully mentally recuperate from the ordeals that he's been through. But what will happen is it will prevent any further ordeals going on. And we have seen that a number of the elephants which have been rescued from zoos around the world do show signs of recuperation within a year to 2 years in proper sanctuaries. There are sanctuaries around which are not proper sanctuaries. There are some in Sri Lanka, which are tourist attractions, and they tend to relocate elephants there for the sake of tourists, but the animals are still badly treated, and they breed them and they export them to zoos and circuses, so that's not a good sanctuary. There's good sanctuaries and bad sanctuaries. But what has happened, I think, as a result of this is I think there's something quite interesting that's happened during this period of COVID. And I don't know if you've seen it yourself as well, but suddenly we've become a lot more interested in life. And suddenly all that rushing around and doing the business and making that dollar more than the other guy, it's sort of like a lot of that momentum seems to have gone. And we've been a lot more interested in us and our family and well-being and health and all sorts of things that previously we'd forgotten all about because we were in just such a hurry to do all the things that we seem to think we need to do. During this period also, we've seen a big swing of people following that we're doing who've suddenly become much more interested in the welfare of the planet, the welfare of animals on the planet. You know, people definitely now are much more conscious of the green issues than they were 6 months ago. Many people now have already realized that without all the air traffic we had previously, the air is cleaner. The seas are cleaner. There's fish in the rivers in Venice. There's fish in the rivers in London. Things have started to change because in this very short period of us not being humans and decimating the entire planet, there has been a sign of recovery, which I think was really good because up to that point, I don't think a lot of the population actually really believed that there was anything really wrong with it or there was any hope of recovery. But I have seen this change. Many of my clients with the other business we're involved in, they don't want to travel anymore. They don't want to do that damage that they think they were doing previously. They want to do virtual broadcasts. They don't see the need to fly to Australia to deliver a speech which they could deliver like we're doing now. Why do that? Why put those extra carbon things in the planet? And it has made people much more conscious of the well-being of so many other things, not just people, but animals and the planet too. So maybe there's something that's positive that's come of this awful bloody pandemic.
Since you're in France right now talking with us, but you have been, of course, from UK and then South Africa. Are you noticing people writing about the impact of climate change on animal life?
Yes, because it is benefiting animals. Definitely, there are the lack of pollution has had an enormous impact. Or even in the major cities, you'll notice that the bird life is more abundant. The bird song in the morning is louder than it used to be because the pollution in the skies is so much less. There is a lot of you can read many articles, and I just notice it from people I deal with as well. It's become one of those things that people, even individually, have started to understand and relate to.
Well, I'm seeing on my yard, we have more birds. I used to have a lot more about 20, 25 years ago, and they almost started disappearing. I will wake up by listening to them in the morning. It was no longer the case, but now some are coming back because of, I think most likely because of pandemic, because I don't think climate in this area is changing. You mentioned in the conversation there are good sanctuaries and bad sanctuaries.
Yes.
There may be good zoos and bad zoos. It doesn't even mention, because you're saying that it is impossible for animals who human interference have already taken place to completely let them free. in the wild. So human being will probably continue to have interaction with them. If that is dictating things, then isn't this important to have a list of good sanctuaries, bad sanctuaries, good zoos and bad zoos, so people decide who to patronize, where not to go?
Yes, it is. It's almost like there should be like a TripAdvisor of zoos, so you know whether or not it's ethically correct for you to go to one in your town. We did a project a number of years ago with One Young World, which is a major convention. I don't know if you're aware of it, for young people. It goes all over the world. It's like Davos, but it's for young people who actually make a big difference. And they come from 192 countries, which I think is pretty much what the UN recognizes as being all of the countries in the world. And young people, and we spoke to them, Cher and I were there, and we addressed them, and we asked them to evaluate the zoos within their own territories. And it was really interesting, the responses that we got, that, you know, some are actually really quite caring places, and others are just an absolute disaster. It's, I think an awful lot of it, you know, I genuinely think that the problems that we came across with the zoo in Islamabad was certainly not anything to do with malintent. It was just to do with lack of education. Because the people who were looking after the animals in the zoo, they had got experience of looking after animals, but primarily from rural areas where they were looking after domestic animals. So just because you can look after goats doesn't mean you can now come and look after lions. It's a very different animal. And if you're a vet who looks after cattle, how can you be a vet who's trained for wildlife? It needs retraining, you know, and that's quite a big problem. And it's not just in Islamabad; it's in many areas. That it's a question of training, so they don't accidentally do the things that they have done to so many animals.
What is the so think about that? You know, there need to be a published list of bad zoos and good zoos and things like that. What is the best country for animals, would you say?
Well, there's no best sanctuary for animals because all of them tend to specialize. Yeah, the Aspinall Foundation have an absolutely fantastic sanctuary for gorillas and primates in England. And we're working currently to try and resolve the issues with the gorilla and the bonobo in Thailand, which from that dreadful rooftop zoo there, which we're working with the Aspinall Foundation to move them. But it's the sanctuaries for elephants. There are many. There's really good ones in America. And Scott, who you're talking about with the animal that he moved right the way across America to Brazil, has got a fabulous sanctuary in Brazil for elephants. The problem, of course, is that, you know, that might be the greatest sanctuary in the whole world, but to get an elephant from Islamabad to Brazil is really a big issue. And even to Cambodia is not very simple. But there are some fantastic sanctuaries around the world, and we've worked with a lot of them. And that's why we chose Cambodia for Kaavan, because we are aware of the ones that could take him and of those which would be the best for him, not only for his physical health, but for his mental health. And that's where Cambodia came in. I know you were asking, somebody asked earlier about, you know, that's great, we do these things for animals, but what about people? It's not that we do these things for animals and we forget about people. You know, Cher is actually one of the most generous people I've ever met and is incredibly supportive of human issues too. There was a town in America I know that ran out of water, and she had something like 20,000 bottles of water flown in on a private aircraft to help those people. So she doesn't just care about animals, she also is pretty involved in helping people too. That's one of the things she's done.
So how you became so passionate in person about animals and their welfare?
Probably because of my wife. She is South African and she introduced me to wildlife there. And I spent so much time in the bush with these animals, and I sort of understand them, and I feel that in a way, by being more concerned for animals, I might be being a bit of a better person. which actually I think is something I need to do. It's hard to be a good person, but if you can do an act of kindness to an animal, I think it's quite a nice thing to do. If you can do it to hundreds of animals, that's probably quite good.
So what are your next project? What you plan to do in future in these areas?
Well, this is still a big one to get Kaavan moved. Unfortunately, with COVID hitting us so badly, it set everything back. We couldn't get the vets in, we couldn't get permits, we couldn't get all sorts of things. So this has delayed us a lot. The next one remains the gorilla and the bonobo in Thailand. There's hundreds of projects. But the thing is, what we really want to do is a really good friend of mine started the Band-Aid Trust, Bob Geldof. And he did that to save the people of Ethiopia when 32 million of them were starving back in the famine in 1985. And the concept of Free the Wild is not dissimilar from that of Bob's with the Band-Aid Trust. It's not for us to personally become involved in every single animal problem in the world. What we like to do is work with people like Four Paws to identify problems that they're working on, like saving the animals in Beirut recently, where we can actually grant them money to help them do the things that they need to do for the betterment of those things. This became a bit of a personal problem with the thing with Kaavan. It's got a bit out of hand.
Well, thank you so much, Marcon, for being with us at Muslim Network TV. Thank you so much for your time, for your passion, and your commitment to this particular cause. And thank you, Sherdil Khan and Dr. Abdul Wahid for producing today's show. You are watching Muslim Network TV on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, Apple TV, whole lot of social media, and our own website, muslimnetwork.tv. Peace. Salam.